Hey guys, Josiah here. First off, I want to apologize for not getting onto this video right away. Tuesday afternoon, I had to go straight off to class, and then I ended up being too busy with school, and the same ended up being the case with yesterday. By now, there are quite a few actually very good summaries that you can find out all the details about the keynote that happened this past Tuesday. But I'm going to go ahead and instead of doing an entire review, I'm just going to touch on the points that stuck out to me, and then you guys are more than welcome to check out the other channels for more information, or if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. But the first part of the keynote, basically they were just talking about how Macs are doing relative to the rest of the market, and some stats that I remember them mentioning. The Macs are actually growing at 2 to 3 times the rate of the rest of the industry. They also talked about several landmarks where the Macs really experienced a lot of increase. The first was with the Intel Switch, and then the next part was Vista, and you could see, they actually showed a graph, and you could see it really started to peak then, and then also when Leopard was announced. The next part that they mentioned, Johnny Ive, who is basically like the chief designer at Apple, he came up and introed the new design process, which it's what they call a unibody enclosure. And rather than using the bunch of parts that were involved in like the old MacBooks and the MacBook Pros, they went ahead and switched to just a single slab of aluminum. And then, like the rumor sites were saying, they actually used like a combination of lasers to cut the aluminum, and then also water jets to both clean and also just kind of separate the little pieces. And then all along the way, they were mentioning that the entire process, they recycle all the parts that are left over. So it's very efficient. They showed a video after the keynote of it. The next thing, obviously this was a notebook related event, and they ended up delivering both a new MacBook Pro and a new MacBook. And some new design changes happened. The first thing is that they're a lot thinner now. The MacBook Pro is about 0.05 inches thinner than the previous generation one. It was made with the unibody enclosure, which makes it a lot more durable, and it's also quite a bit lighter. I think they're mentioning it's like a quarter of a pound lighter than the previous generation of MacBook Pro. The next thing was Apple has been working with NVIDIA to manufacture a new graphics chip called the GeForce 9400M, and basically this is an integrated chip, so it's not an actual like a graphics processor, but it's supposed to deliver about 5 times what the Intel integrated graphics would have delivered before, and that's in typical gameplay and also just under pretty heavy load. They also showed a comparison of the new chip, its performance relative to like the highest spec MacBook Pro before, which was like a 512 megabyte NVIDIA chip, and it was anywhere from about 50% to almost 60% of the performance of a 512 megabyte actual graphics card, which I think is amazing for being an integrated chip. Now, in the MacBook Pro, they also introed a new chip from NVIDIA called the 9600M, which is similar, but it's actually in conjunction with the integrated. And what they offer you now is 2 different options. The first is an integrated option, like I mentioned with the 9400, and that will give you about 5 hours of battery life. And the 9600M will give you about 4 hours of battery life, and it depends on what your needs are, but you can actually switch between one or the other. So that was kind of neat. They showed a little demonstration of that, and they showed kind of like the schematic of how everything's laid out on the inside of the computer, and it looks really slick. Aside from that, the only other differences, aside from maybe the new design, was the screens are now all glossy, and if you've ever seen pictures of the iMac, it's almost exactly the same. It has a glass covering across the entire screen, and from what I've seen of the pictures, it looks like a really slick screen, very, very bright. I'm actually going to the Apple store up in Legacy Village to check one out shortly after I finish making this video, but I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what they look like. Hopefully they actually have some on display, because from what I hear, a lot of Apple stores didn't actually have them on display yesterday. So that's the MacBook Pros. Everything else, the specs pretty much stayed the same. The processors were switched to the Montevina chipset, which I think that still uses the Penryn processors, but now you can get them in 2.4, 2.53 gigahertz, and there's an optional 2.8 gigahertz on the 15-inch model. And then something that they also introduced is what's called a display port, and this will actually replace like the standard DVI and the mini DVI ports that you were finding on previous generations of computers. And as they were saying in the keynote, this is actually going to be a port they're featuring on all the future computers from Apple. The next thing was the MacBook Air actually was switched to the Penryn processor, and it's still available in a 1.6, and now it's available also in a 1.83 gigahertz model. And there's also an optional 128 gigabyte solid state drive option available. The hard drive option was bumped to now 120 gigs, which is still a 4200 RPM drive. They also introed a new cinema display, and this one features LED backlighting. It's the largest of their displays to feature LED backlighting. It's a 24-inch. It also features the glass covered similar to the iMac, except there isn't like the huge bezel. It's literally just the black portion of the iMac screen. That's what it looks like, and it looks very slick. The thing that they touched on was that there's the regular power connector, and there's also a cable that comes out right next to the power cable, which has a MagSafe connector so that you can actually plug a laptop straight into it from there. You don't need your power cables or any of that. There's also a USB so that when you plug it into a laptop, you can use any peripherals that are connected to the laptop. And there's also the display port, which it uses to connect to the cinema display, which is very slick. It makes it seem like it's a lot easier to use. Just to touch on one detail, I went on the Apple Store just to kind of see how much it would be if I configured a MacBook for myself. And I noticed down toward the bottom they're actually selling adapters for the new DisplayPort connector, and the least expensive one was $29. The most expensive one was $99, and that would be the dual DVI that would be powering the 30-inch cinema display, which $99 doesn't seem like a really worthwhile trade-off, considering the DisplayPort connector is a lot smaller than the DVI was, but it doesn't seem like it would be worth carrying around a huge dongle for that. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. And the one more thing at the end was an upgraded MacBook, and it looks identical to the MacBook Pro, same thickness. It's 0.95 inches. They are keeping the original, the lowest spec white MacBook, which is now going to be $999 instead of $1,099, and that will still be available. It still has the original integrated graphics from Intel, and it's pretty much the same stuff as you would have been able to find before the notebook refresh. As far as like the new models go, they have two different ones. Now they've also switched the processors. Now there's a 2.0 gigahertz model available and also a 2.4. The 2.0 basically comes with the standard options. It also comes with the new NVIDIA graphics, and the 2.4 gigahertz comes with not only all of that stuff, but it also comes with the backlit keyboard, which they touched on a lot of details, but they mentioned that it's now almost $700 less expensive for you to get the Pro features that you would have had to go all the way to buy a MacBook Pro to find before. With the MacBooks now, they feature LED backlighting. Again, like the MacBook Pro, they also have the glass displays, and they've also done away with FireWire on the MacBook, which is still a feature on the MacBook Pro. There were a lot of rumors going around that they might actually be removing that port, but that was only the case with the MacBook, which for me, I don't use any FireWire peripherals, but I don't know if maybe down the road, if I needed it, that I would be missing that kind of a feature. But hopefully they either bring it back or give some kind of an Ethernet to FireWire option or something. So that's the gist of the event, actually. I hope I touched on everything there. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And like I said, there are also a lot of really good summaries on YouTube already that you can check out that go into a lot more detail about the keynote. I just wanted to touch on the ones that stuck out to me. So I hope this was useful to you, and feel free to leave comments or questions, and I hope to talk to you all soon. Bye. Before I forget, Apple also introduced a new trackpad, which is now all glass, and I guess they said they put a lot of research into making sure that it was the right texture and the right coefficient of friction. And now the entire trackpad is the button, and that's configurable with software that comes with the operating system.